Hello. I am so glad that we have some regulars out there who understand that this is actually at 11 a.m. and not 11 p.m. I'm sorry that I put that up there. I don't know what I was thinking. So we might have some people show up later tonight and hoping to enjoy a live stream, and they will not have one. So anyway, good to see you out there, Missy, and good to see you, Bobbert. And if there's anyone else out there in the room, please say hello. Bill, good to see you. Mary, good to see you. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm looking forward to this topic. I spent some time this morning thinking about it. Actually, ended up writing an essay about it. I'm
You
not gonna,
did.
yeah, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but just kind of get my thoughts together. I was thinking about, how I've experienced these things in the past and what I may have, learned over time and how I think about them maybe a little bit differently today. Bill, I think I said hello, and Tim, good to see you. It's always good to be here on a Saturday, and I hope that this is helpful to everybody. It builds a little recovery capital for you, and maybe we can have a conversation both ways. So, feel free to comment in the chat here, the live chat, and Facebook and YouTube, and call us when we open up the phones at our toll free number. In fact, I'll just go ahead and open them up. We don't often get callers or very many of them, but we welcome those calls for sure. So I'll just run that across the bottom of the screen. So, at any rate, let's just jump right into it, Mary. I was thinking about these steps, and I thought that maybe I would start just by asking you a couple of questions about them
Okay.
as a way to kind of get into the conversation. And I was just wondering, first of all, did you find these at all helpful to you personally?
In my whole life? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It gave me a structure to look at. Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's what I found useful too, was a structure. I had, you know, when I was kind of thinking about this and writing out this essay, I was thinking about how at that first AA meeting that I attended, I was struck by the honesty of the people in the room. In fact, I won't forget how I actually felt when someone introduced themselves as I'm so and so, I'm an alcoholic. To me, it was like I was stunned, because that I would never describe myself in that way. But here in the Midwest, and I know this isn't common everywhere, but the practice is when you have a new person in a meeting, you share your story. And they went around the room and they all shared their story with me. And the honesty just touched me deeply. And it immediately helped me trust these people. And like it says, I wanted what they had. I wanted to have a normal, manageable life. And it seemed like they did.
Right.
The meeting I went to was downtown. At that time, people used to dress nice to go to work and so forth. These people all dressed nice, like they're like regular people, and I didn't feel like I was a regular person at the time. I felt like I was kind of a mess. So that honesty, but then again, too, I was kind of afraid by the honesty because they around here, and I know in most traditional meetings, they read from How It Works
Mhm.
in step 5. And with that reading comes a warning that this requires rigorous honesty. And
Mhm.
some of us aren't constitutionally capable of being rigorously honest. And those are really unfortunate people.
Those are the poor souls.
And I thought I might be one of them because I was untruthful. I had a lot of covering up to do because of my drinking. And I had told so many lies to so many people about so many different things. I didn't
Yeah.
even know what was true anymore.
Yes. I so relate to that. Different people knew different parts of my life, but nobody knew the whole everything because I
Yeah.
was so working so hard on being fine and looking fine.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
Tyler. So that part of being honest, and that's what I think these steps are about anyway. I mean, in step 4, we're practicing self-honesty, I guess. And in step 5, taking it a step further and actually being honest with ourselves to another person,
Correct.
you
Yes.
know, about a lot of different stuff.
A lot of different things, and it's a lot to think about when you come to where you are when you first do the 4th step. You could write pages and pages and at least I could, of
Yeah.
pages of things that I was holding on to that were hurtful or
Yeah.
shameful or guilt-ridden or secrets. I mean, it was just overwhelming almost thinking about doing the exercise.
I was wondering, by the way, what process you did follow, if you remember when you first did this.
The very first time I did it, my sponsor had me write like an autobiography, sort of my relationship with how I got to where I was with drugs and alcohol and food, because that was one of my issues too, was sugar and that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so it was sort of like I just wrote my story
Mhm.
in longhand,
Mhm.
and that's how I did it. There weren't columns the first time I ever did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you find that helpful?
Yeah, I did find it helpful because I don't think I'd ever done that before for my own life. I had
Right.
never really written out the story of my life, and because I was always trying to look good and trying to focus on the positives and not looking at the other parts.
Right.
So it was focusing on the other parts that was important for me, and it was ultimately just the writing of it was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always found writing to be really therapeutic, and I started journaling pretty early on, and actually the first couple of years of my sobriety, I think I journaled really, really very regularly. It was kind of a way to help me kinda understand my feelings and thoughts at the time and what I was going through. Um, I don't think honestly now I was still pretty young in life, but I don't think that I ever gave a lot of, thought to my past, I guess, and how I reacted to life, or I never really looked within myself to try to figure myself out, prior to having being exposed to this. I never practiced self honesty, I guess. Never really thought of it as a concept
Right.
before.
Or just introspection, and I appreciate.
Introspection.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said about when you went to a meeting, people were saying things that you never heard people say in normal conversations that were completely honest about themselves in a very vulnerable way that I had never heard before, and I had heard before because, of course, I grew up in AA,
That's right.
but I had never applied it to myself
Right.
because I was all about looking good, and I wasn't an alcoholic. That was my parents' problem,
Right.
but then it was mine, and then I had to talk about myself personally.
Right. Well, I'm happy to report we have 18 people in the room, even though I said it was
Woohoo!
11 o'clock at night. Crazy. Anyway, um, yeah, so that whole part about being honest, I think, was an obstacle for me in the beginning. It was something that I was a little bit afraid of. Did you have any obstacles that you had to overcome before you started even thinking about or actually getting into the work involved with this?
With the 4th and the 5th or just the 4th? Or
Either one or both.
okay. Oh, yeah, I the 4th wasn't hard because 'cause I'm a writer, I like to write, so that
Mhm.
part wasn't hard. Um, the real hard part for me was trusting another human being with what I had written. So, the 4th step was kinda easy for me in a way, but I sat on it for a very long time, and I don't recommend that because I was trying to gauge who I could tell it to that I would either never see again,
Mhm.
which was the best way to do it because I was at a convention in San Diego at the time, and I was looking for a stranger that I could just do the exercise with and never have to see them again. Because I have trust issues, and I wasn't sure that whatever it was I was going to tell them that they wouldn't tell the whole world. Because that was just what I was looking at, and so that was hard. And I don't recommend doing it that way because once everything sort of got dredged up, it needed to have somewhere to go,
Mm.
and I just didn't. It was sort of a burden that I was carrying around, and I don't recommend doing that. I recommend just doing them quickly together.
Mhm. Was there any major takeaway or something that you learned about yourself through this process that you think you might not have otherwise, or maybe helped you get there earlier, sooner?
Um, I guess I realized the critical voice in my head was running the show,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize how mean that person was on the inside. That was my inner critic was really running my whole life,
Right.
and I wouldn't let that inner critic talk to other people that way. Like I would never talk to another person the way I talk to myself about myself. And that was something that I realized that wasn't, um, I didn't have to live my life that way. I didn't have to hate myself. Didn't have to be normalized.
Right.
And up until then, I hated myself, and that was normal for me. And
Mhm.
everything in my life revolved around how to control that hate or alleviate the hate. And that's where drugs and alcohol and food came in.
Yes. Hey, LaDon, good to have you there. Welcome. Welcome to the live stream. Yeah, I think that what I got from it now, I did the traditional way, I guess, of examining my resentments. And my takeaway from it was when I went through there is I saw a lot of insecurity. I never really felt safe. And that just ran throughout my life. And I think that to a large degree that impacted the way I reacted to everything in the world and why I was the way I was, my personality to big extent. But I did have some obstacles about this thing when I was looking at it, and it wasn't necessarily just the idea or the fear of having to divulge all of my whole life to some other person, but at the group I went to, they really stressed the self-centeredness thing, and I think that I went through a long period of time of really beating myself up as a self-centered bastard before I ever could do this. So the whole idea was that self-centeredness was really at the root of my problem, and I really needed to get down to that self-centeredness so I could exercise it and get it out of me. And I think that what is kind of wrong with that now is we're instead of asking, you know, what happened to us, we were
Right.
asking what is wrong with us. And I was
Yes.
really looking at it through that critical way. And I
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way the group was actually kind of having you do it.
Right. And that's what they call character defects.
Exactly,
So it's like you
exactly.
came
So
in with this wonderful character and now you've annihilated it and it's your fault.
right.
And you know what uh I don't do with people if I do the fourth step with them now is 100% what their faults are or what they resentments are. I always do as much of what the good parts, what they appreciate about themselves and what they have to be proud of,
Right.
because it's not just leaving someone with I did all this and then I'm going to like confess my sins. I just don't go with that approach anymore, but I love in this Beyond Belief book on March 28th, it says that step four is a fact finding mission, not a confession of sins.
Mm.
Um, and step five is not intended to humiliate, but it's also about like what the resentments usually built fences. And so, what are all these defense mechanisms that I have in my life, then these fences that I built that I'm just living with on a normal, regular basis?
Mhm.
And maybe I don't need them anymore, but first I have to see if there are any there. And then
Mhm.
maybe can I make a gate in there so I can walk freely and not have to walk around everything? So it's sort of looking at this structure I built that used to be great for me. Like it was a kid's tent in the backyard that I loved, but now as an adult, I don't use that same structure. So it's a way
Mhm.
to get current, but it's really not about humiliation or I think I see it more in a more balanced way now, and I don't agree I don't like the term character defects. I just look at
No.
it as old coping mechanisms that no
Exactly.
longer work.
Which is what they are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, that you brought up resentment. That was another obstacle I had because I didn't really know what a resentment was, I don't think. I never used the word growing up. I never thought in terms of resentment. I resent somebody or whatever. So I always thought of it in terms of I was bitter. I was bitter about something, or maybe I didn't like something that someone else had. I was kind of jealous or
right.
envious, or that's how I always thought of the word resentment. And then I had a little bit of a breakthrough, and it came thanks to our friends Joe and Charlie, who are so famous now. I had no idea they were at the time, I don't think they were, but I was at a AA conference in Arkansas, and it was called Springtime in the Ozarks, and I went to a seminar that Joe and Charlie were giving about step 4. And one of them broke down the word resentment, and I know we've all heard this now
Right,
for me, as resentment, as
right,
to re-feel something again.
right.
Re
Resend it. Keep
Yeah,
resending it, resending it, and resending it.
yeah, and that made total sense to me that I would relive these past memories and feel the emotion as if they were having today.
Yeah,
And of course, the older these memories were that I would relive, the more I shaped them into my own way of thinking about them, I guess. They took on a reality of their own. The memories may have been based in fact, but over the years I kind of made them into a different story, I guess. I don't know. And so it was kind of useful for me to look, like you said, it was a fact finding mission to look at the facts, what actually happened.
Right.
As we say now in a more trauma informed society, what happened to me?
Right.
What were the events that happened to me? Mariah says that step 4 is a fact finding mission, not a confession of sins. That's great for this recovering Catholic.
Yes. Because I'm not going to say to give you 3 Hail Marys and go about your business.
Yeah, yeah. So
But
that
I do feel like resentments, and it's a thing that happened, and then we told ourselves a story
the
about
story
it,
about it.
and we
Exactly.
normalized it, and it became a part of our body, our inner world body, and it for me, it keeps out all the joy and peace and love and fun that I could be having because it takes up so much space in my
Right.
current present. So it's like, do I really want to hold on to that, or do I want more joy and peace?
Right. I love that. It's a story that we tell about ourselves, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And we make up a story, and we might have a total right to that story and be
Mhm.
100% justified in that
Mhm.
story. And I'm not saying that we're not.
Right.
I'm just saying that it becomes crowded in here
Mhm.
with all that. And
Not so
so it's,
helpful.
yeah, it's very crowded. And it's a way to kind of relieve myself of all the past so that I can be more present in the present.
Mhm. Bobbert says that he and I think Bobbert mentioned this before that he went to therapy before going into a peer support group, AA, or I think he went to AA. Yeah, he did go into AA. He was already sober, had already been in therapy, so he had already worked through this, which is kind of unique. I don't
Right.
think most of us have had that experience, but he had. And seeing a therapist would be a good way of kind of dealing with a lot of this stuff for sure.
Yes.
Um, you know, I didn't know anything about trauma at the time. If someone had told me that I had experienced trauma, I would say, "What are you talking about? I think I had a pretty decent life."
Mm.
But I did have trauma uh, that impacted me. And I don't want to kind of belabor it, but of course, the biggest resentment that I was dealing with at the time, that I was only like 5 years removed from the event, was my mother's suicide.
Hmm.
You know, and that was something that I would relive, and I
Yes.
had a lot of guilt associated with it. If I had only done this differently,
Right.
if I
Yes.
could have just, recognized things a little bit sooner, all this kind of stuff. A lot of guilt and a lot of shame, because it was something that we couldn't even talk about
Right.
openly,
Yeah.
and so it was always held within me.
Yes.
So I had a lot of shame and guilt associated with that and other things too. So I just had this stuff piled on over the
Yeah.
years, a lot of shame
And
and
you're just
guilt.
walking around with it, and you didn't even realize really how much we carry.
Right.
We don't realize how big the stories are in there. It just becomes normalized as a way to cope.
But thank goodness for this. I didn't have a sponsor who asked me to look into my part of her death,
Good.
because
Very good.
that would have just compounded the trauma, because I was already feeling guilty that
Yeah.
I could have done something differently that could have saved her.
Right.
But I say that because over the years I have heard from people who unfortunately have had these terrible sponsors
Mhm.
who have asked them to think about their part in some trauma or abuse that they experienced as a child.
Agreed.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe that that happens, but I've heard it more than a few times.
Right.
And it's troubling to that would even occur.
Agreed. That's why I do recommend that people see a professional for this 4th step, if you feel called to do that.
Yeah.
Any kind of professional that you feel comfortable with, because it's really, I feel, to do this step is a form of trust with another human being, and to do it with, to really think about it and choose wisely. And professionals are trained to deal with trauma and to help people unpack trauma. And I highly recommend it if you're called to do that.
Right. And I would also, I think what's important in when we're encountering people who are newly getting involved in recovery, they're just realizing they've got a problem. Life is a mess. They're looking at all these different things to do. And a lot of times we don't have money. We don't have medical insurance. We
True.
have no job, whatever. Well, there are resources out there, and I took avail of them early on. But there's a lot of places, really good places that will, either charge on a sliding scale, or
Yes.
if you don't have any money at all, they are funded and with grants and so forth that they will help you.
Yes.
And maybe not the same quality. You might not have someone with the big education or whatever. I don't know, but still very good care, very good care.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
and I did avail myself to that. The first time I was exposed to any sort of a therapy was with someone with a master's degree in social work.
Hmm.
But he was trained to help me process all these things that I was dealing with at the time, and it was a good way to kind of dip my toe into that.
Yes. Well, that was really good that you did that. And
Oh, we got a caller.
oh,
Shall we
good.
take it? It's from
Sure.
Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
I think it might be Fred, but let's find out. Hello, Richmond, Virginia. How you doing?
Hello, John.
Oh, is
Hi,
this
Mary. This is
Fred?
Fred in Richmond.
Hey,
Good to hear.
Fred.
Good to hear from
Uh,
you. What's
I'd
on your?
like to say
Go ahead.
say thanks for reminding me of those things. But the interesting thing I was thinking about after some of the comments made was that a lot of people have regret and resentment when they do their fourth step because they feel abuse or some kind of things that didn't agree with their life. So that's what, if they can't work through it, it seems that that's where I've understood why the people go back out. And a lot of them drink to death.
Hmm.
So, when you put pressure on individuals to try to do something that they've never done before, it's kind of like you have to pay attention to the signs. And I agree with you, Mary, that professionals have more understanding into the aspects of, what trauma has caused those people. So, the topic is not a light discussion,
True.
but, a good thing about spirituality that we practice, and even as non-believers, we have spirituality because it's our moral and virtue and morals and virtue. So, real spirituality just means that you love somebody enough and you understand and they feel your love. So if you get that feeling of love from the rooms through the intimate understanding of the conversations and the topics and the discussions and all the things, so that's what makes you feel good about being there.
Hmm.
So as we share those things, that helps us with some consciousness of our own mind, heart, that makes us feel better about ourselves.
I like that, Fred, and thank you for the comment about the danger of putting pressure on someone to do this. I mean,
Right.
I got that pressure.
Yeah.
It was always that, John, you're procrastinating. It's a defect, and blah 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 blah. Well, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. You do this,
Right.
and it's all due time. But you're right, Joe. Why pressure someone who hasn't done this before, might not be ready for it? And honestly, when you get down to it, and Mary, I wanted to talk about this too, is this even really that necessary to do this, to look at the past and so forth? I'm not quite so sure that it is. That doesn't mean that I don't think it's helpful to look
Mhm.
at the past like that, but I don't know if it's so necessary, that there might be other ways of doing it, of looking at maybe your more current existing behaviors, not just
Correct.
and then deal with any past trauma, elsewhere. But in your recovery, just deal with what's going on today and how you're reacting to life today. What do you think about that, Fred?
I think you're right, John. You know why? Because if you look back to the history of AA and you look at Dr. Bob's story, his son was at Al-Anon, Bob Jr. Smitty, and
Oh, that's right.
he talked about not even wanting to be in the house when his father was around. You know, so even though Dr. Bob has the most success story of being somebody who helped recovered alcoholics, his own son didn't want to be there with him while he was drinking, and that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you go through the whole gamut, from Alateen to alcoholic to recovery to marriage, that you make a mistake or something and have somebody that you marry who's an alcoholic and you're recovering and it doesn't work out, and have children and all kinds of things happen, and all these things, you know, when you look at yourself in a fourth step, you did it once, you did it twice, you did it 3 times. If Mr. Brown really had any concern for you, he wouldn't be fucking with your wife, you know? So that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Fred. It's nice to hear from you again. I appreciate your comments. And it's okay to say the F word on YouTube. It's totally okay. Yeah. But I was surprised to hear that coming from you. But that's cool.
Okay, well, that's okay.
It's all right.
You can bleep it out. You can bleep it out if you want, but it's
we don't need to.
Too late now. We're live. We're live.
One of my favorite words.
Yeah, you know what? It's a therapeutic word, and I think
it's a noun and a verb.
I think that Angela and I actually did a whole episode on the word. Well, yeah. I can't remember what it was. It was, oh man, I got to look back and see what that episode was. But we said that word like repeatedly throughout the entire thing. It was cool.
Good. That probably felt good, didn't it?
It was very therapeutic. Well, Fred, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for calling. Please call back again, okay?
Sure, John. Take care.
Take care.
Nice
Be
to
well.
talk with you.
Bye-bye. Well, it's nice to hear from him. Joe has a comment. Used to hear so many folks say they drank because they couldn't deal with step 4. Wow. That was part of my motivation for doing the early steps 1 through 5.
Yeah.
They couldn't deal with step 4.
Well, you know, the present is like what is, you know, it is a lot to go back to like first grade. I tell people, like, you don't have to go back to first grade when you had a fight on the playground and dredge up every time you did something wrong that you feel. And in a way, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Different people need different things. And so I tell them to just take the top layer of what, you know, if you think of resentments, what are your like first things come to mind? And if it happened a long time ago, great. If it happened yesterday, great. You know, it's like, do it to the level of you're wanting to do it. And then I also tell people when they do the 4th step, they can also do like the sex part with a different person than they did the resentment part with. You can do, you know, you can talk to different people about different parts of your life. You don't have to tell that one person every single thing. And I do think there can be a therapeutic result of being able to tell one human being all your hurts and resentments and things that happen, to have that one person witness your hurts or your shames or your guilts. Because, you know, for the most part, up until then, I had tried to look good on the outside and carried and didn't talk about that kind of stuff. And it's also, you know, I hope we talk about what it's like to be the person that hears a 5th step.
Yeah.
Because that's really not talked about a lot in the rooms that I go to or went to. It's a really important part to be that person that hears someone's 5th
Well, let's
step.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience?
Yes, I have had that experience many times. And it's a very important place to be present, I feel, to not have expectations, and to, you know, I have to center myself in a way that I'm really clear-headed, present, coming from a heart space in all the ways that I do that, to come and just be, have a compassionate, hold a space of compassion for this person. and be present with this person. And no matter what the detail is, because some are very long, some might take, I've heard people that said their fourth step or fifth step took 5 hours, or 3 days. Like I've never encountered that. Um, and I think for me, when I do it, it's about holding a space of compassion and respect for the person that's telling it. And then it's also important how I respond or what I do. I really tell the person before they even do it. This is sort of how I do the fifth step. And I might interrupt while you're talking and say, let's go back to that and let's revisit that and tell me again what that was and how did you think. Other people do it where the person just talks for however long to read their fourth step and then they comment. And when I have done a fifth step with someone, it's really important for me to not want to be validated by the person that heard the whole story, but I'm a human and it's hard not to want to be validated by the person. So the person's reaction when I do
Mm.
that fifth step is important to me. And for the most part, anyone I've done a step with were very loving and kind. And what I realized was all the stuff that I was holding on to wasn't as horrible as I thought it was. And that the person said, oh, well, I did that. Oh, I did that. Or they did something 10 times worse. And so it kind of normalizes me as not the villain that I've made in my mind. I'm just a regular human being dealing with being
Right.
a human.
I got that out of this. That's what I got out of it is I did get to that, come to that conclusion that I'm just human, that I'm no different from a lot of other people.
Right.
You would be a great sponsor. I mean, I love what you had to say about, different things are right for different people,
Hmm. Yeah.
first of
Yeah.
all.
There's no cookie cutter thing
Mm-mm,
in my world because there's
no.
so many resources now, especially in the secular world, of ways to do the fourth step. And I
Hmm.
usually tell a person that wants to do it, you Google how to do it and figure out which chart you like or which method you like, and you pick it, and then we'll do it. And
That's
you can just Google, like Russell Brand has his way of doing it.
hmm.
The low self-esteem lady, Beth Ake, who wrote
Oh yeah.
12 steps for people with low self-esteem, she has a wonderful way of doing it.
Right.
This book that I've talked about before, the little book, A Collection of Alternate 12 Steps, has,
Hmm.
synopsises of how people do it. There's so many ways to do it now
Right. Right.
that it makes it a lot easier to interpret the step.
Right. And I would also add that is if you want to do it. If you want to,
Exactly.
yeah,
If you want to do it. Yes.
yeah, I would just be, yeah. And so if someone is going to listen to this either now or in the future, and you're new, you're getting involved in AA, you got people putting pressure on you to do this, and they're giving you a really narrow path to follow. No, that's not right. Listen
Right.
to people like Mary.
Yeah. Just
It's
do
like
it. There's no have to. Everything in AA
no,
is a suggestion.
exactly.
And you shouldn't be pressured to do something you don't want to do.
No.
Yeah, so you got to follow your own gut.
And I also think that the bottom line benefit that I got from this anyway is what we were talking about in the beginning. And it was learning that practice of introspection and self honesty. And a lot of that happens every time you attend a meeting, and you share a little bit about yourself, about what you did that day or what's going on in your life, or you listen to someone else do the same. It just adds a little bit more practice into this idea of thinking about your thoughts and feelings and behaviors, and understanding that other people are having the same reactions
Yeah.
to things
Yes.
as you do, and
Yes.
learning from that.
Yes.
Just that experience over time kind of
Help.
meets the standard, I think,
Yes.
of these steps,
I
quite
agree.
frankly.
And it helps me to feel like a human, part of the human race, because
Right.
I'm not any different than what they're talking about. I've had the same exact thing happen to me and
Yeah.
thought the same thing and reacted the same way. Yeah.
And I would think it would be totally correct for someone to say, you know what, my experience with these steps was over time as I was attending meetings and getting honest with myself and other people. I think that'd be totally appropriate. And that anything that I had that was really serious, that was really traumatizing to me, I dealt with that elsewhere,
Correct.
you
Agreed.
know? And that's totally, totally, totally appropriate. Now, what I
Yes.
find interesting too, Mary, is oh yeah, I don't want to forget about this. You want to talk about we're talking about the step 5 part, listening to other people. And I love what you just had to say about letting the person speak and then adding something to that as you were talking, so that, and I'm sure in a very respectful, helpful way, I had that same experience, and I'm very thankful for it. But as I was talking, my sponsor, if there was something that he could see I was kind of struggling with or whatever, he would share with me some bit of information about himself that was similar, that he had gone through, or somehow help me through that difficult moment that he was sensing that I had. Or
Yeah.
like you said, he would say, let's go back and look at that again, and kind of help me through some of the more difficult parts of it. And that was wonderful to have that. I don't feel that he was, I'm very fortunate. I just kind of lucked out. I mean, yeah, he was into the whole self-centeredness stuff, and I needed God and all that stuff, but he was at least a compassionate human being.
Which is really important when you're
Yeah.
telling somebody your life story and your inner world. That is, you did get lucky.
Now we did do it at the city park, which was kind of weird. So we were on a park bench, and
Oh
people would
yeah,
be walking by,
yeah, I've done
So
that.
I'm,
Yes,
oh
I've
my
done it
God.
that way also. Yes, but
So
I did it. I did it one time in a baseball field where nobody was. We were sitting in the
oh,
stands. Yeah, and we
that's
were
nice.
both looking toward the baseball field. So for me, sometimes it's easier to look forward and have the person sitting next to me, so you're not just staring at each other the whole time.
Hmm.
I mean, if I feel like if someone has difficulty with sharing their whatever secrets, that it's easier to just get the words out and just read from the paper, and then just get the words out sometimes just helps with saying it out loud.
Hmm.
And then I feel like it also helps with not being staring at them in a dominant way, that gives people more space to just get the words out. And so that could be driving in a car and they're sitting in the passenger side and we're just driving around. And so we're, it's like passive listening, but also involved, but they don't feel like okay, so I grew up Catholic and you used to go in this little booth and then you barely saw somebody's face through this wicker board thing and you were telling what you thought your sins were. And then they changed it. I think the last time I ever did it, they changed it to you talked in front of the priest and he was just sitting in a chair in a room and you had to sit in front of him and just tell him all your stuff while he was, and I was like, God, this is I don't know what the word was, but it wasn't comfortable, let's put it that
No,
way. Yeah.
Mary, I didn't realize this, but Stuart, Florida is calling and has been on hold for 9 minutes. God, I'm
Oh, by all
sorry.
means, go
I
Stuart,
am
Florida.
so sorry. I thought that you were Fred leaving. I did not know it was Stuart, Florida calling. My apologies. How you
Okay, let's
doing?
hear from Stuart.
Al from Vero. Thanks,
Al.
thanks, John. Hey, buddy, you're giving me a complex here. I'm waiting 10 minutes.
I'm so sorry.
But
This thing that I have,
hey,
it leaves the previous caller hanging out there for a little while, and I thought that's what you were. Anyway, what's on your mind, Al?
hey, no problem, man. Yeah, you got me laughing here. Let me calm down for a second. Good stuff. But the fourth and the fifth, we get down to everybody gives you what I did, those deep secrets.
Mm.
And the reality for a lot of guys, it's who the hell I was, not
Oh.
what the fuck I did all the time. It's how many meetings, people, they're always in the honesty. They're walking the walk and talking the talk. They go home, can't find their big book. Next thing you know, they're kicking the dog and yelling at their wife.
Mm.
It's those little edgy stuff that we have as human beings, and we keep in it. We don't tell people shit like that. We that's stuff that eats us alive, or in my opinion, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I started working. I've sponsored a lot of people over the years. Never an atheist though. Always a Christian or a believer. But he's going like, I lie. I'm always lying. I can't stop lying. I'm lying. I'm going, why the hell do you do that? It just never. It's the personal traits, in my opinion, that I had to get to for me, and most people I know, those personal traits. And some of it, really, I like Jeffrey Munn stuff. He goes through, you make the list and all that kind of stuff. But about
the lousy personal traits is what I like to get into for myself anyway. They keep coming and going. Nobody's listed them yet, but I don't know. You get those, and he also gets into the distorted core belief to the alternate realistic belief.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a little deeper over the beyond the what I did shit. And also a great handbook. I'll bring it up again. The Smart Recovery. They have things in there that are called strategy. Coping during a crisis is in there. How do you go from or try to from calm or from that angry rage to calm?
Yeah.
It's excellent stuff in there for a beginner. You don't need a sponsor. You don't need to go to meetings. It's the next thing best to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the frustration thing, the panic. This shouldn't be happening. How do you turn that off, or how do you correct those traits? And the whole deal is practice, practice, and practice. Even if it's count to 10 and go back to some sort of realistic thinking for me. And it's, again, hell, we've all done shit that's horrible and nasty and we shouldn't do. And we still do, some of us. At least I do. I can catch myself. I got a great sponsor. She lives with me. It's called my wife. She can say, hey, what kind of attitude is that? What kind of behavior is that? It makes me stop and think. And anyway, I'm starting to ramble, but it's a great, there are alternatives just to making those what I did list. And
Right.
I'm a lousy SOB or whatever. What we have lousy traits.
Mhm.
We need to know how to trait or change those traits in my opinion.
Right. Yep.
And both of those books to me are just an alternative, but good stuff.
Thank you, Al, for your call, and thank you for bringing up Jeffrey Munn's book and the way that he went through this step. It's been a while since I've read that, but I don't have it fresh in my mind. But I do recall I really did like his take on this. The one thing I do remember about him that I really, really, really liked was his takes on steps 6 and 7, for whatever reason. And I think what I liked about that is in those steps he was saying, don't think about getting rid of things, but
Mhm.
think about adding good qualities.
Agreed.
'cause
100%.
think about adding good ways or healthy ways of reacting and behaving instead of just kind of exercising your negative traits or whatever. So that's a really good book, I have to say. He did a good job with that. So thanks for bringing that. Also, thanks for bringing up the Smart Recovery thing. I was going to talk about that too, because they're interesting in that they don't really they don't really care about the past so much, but they're looking more at like we were saying earlier, what's going on with you today? How are you reacting to things today?
Mhm.
And like Al was saying,
Right.
there's talking about the difference between, what you would call character defects or whatever, but the difference between, a negative emotion that's healthy and a negative emotion that's not healthy, and like anger and rage. Rage wouldn't be a very healthy way of expressing anger because you're out of control. It could be dangerous. It could be violent. Things could get really, really crazy. Whereas, you could be angry in the way that, something doesn't sit right with you. And
Mhm.
maybe you need to stand up for yourself or somebody else. And that's not a bad anger. So it's just a way of understanding these things a little bit differently. And what I like about Smart Recovery, when they look at this in the present time, is you're still going through this process of getting to the truth, which I think of what this is really about, getting to the truth. And getting to the truth is understanding the reality of what's really happening. So, something happened to me and this is what I think about it. So I reacted this way, but what really happened,
Mhm.
And I think that that's a really nice exercise to go through on a regular daily basis to really get to the truth and to learn new and different ways of reacting to things going forward. I hope I expressed that correctly.
You did very well.
Wonderful. Wonderful, John. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just the personal traits and practice, practice, practice.
Yep.
And you can change. You can change. That's the wonderful hope thing about all this.
Yep.
You can change those personal traits.
Well, thank you again, Al. It's really nice to hear from you. And thank you for your patience for holding for so long. Next time I'll know when I see someone out there that they're there. So thank you again.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Take care now.
Great job, Dan. Bye-bye.
You know, Mary, before we got going, I told you that I haven't done this in a since I've been in secular AA. I
Right.
have actually, and I'm thinking about it. And I was on the receiving end of the fifth step for somebody, and it was a wonderful experience. I've done this before in both ways, and they were similar experiences. But what was nice about this, what he did is he just brought up a few key events in his life
Mm-hmm.
at different points in his life. He didn't go through the entire life story.
Right.
He just had these key events that he wanted to talk about. And I was there to listen to him. And it was just it was a nice conversation, and I could relate to him. He felt like he was being heard, and it was a really nice exercise. And I learned a lot from that too. What I learned from that was you don't necessarily have to go through your entire life and list every little thing since you were in kindergarten or fourth grade or whatever,
Right. Right.
and it wasn't necessary. And I think that's true. I think that a lot of these things are, these coping mechanisms that we have came out in all kinds of different ways, but there are similar coping mechanisms that we have. So, Tyler has a comment I'm going to put up there real quick. Thanks, Mary, for saying, let's do it the way you think will work. And John or not do it. Wish I heard such accommodating words 8 years ago. I try to talk this way now with newcomers.
Yeah.
You have
And
some additional thoughts, Mary?
I think it's all about being conscious of what we're doing instead of just going around knee-jerk reacting to everything. I think it's just a chance to kind of look and say, what, not to try to like unwind the whole ball of string to get to like nothing, but to just get to like what self-sabotaging things are we doing that we wish we weren't,
Right.
and why, and what is the story we've told ourselves about all this stuff, and is that the only interpretation of that? Is that story the only story? And is that story true? Like you said, is it really true? Do we really know that they think that? Like if we're resentful of someone because we think they think, do we really know what they think?
Mm-hmm.
Or did it's kind of just becoming more aware of how we're operating in the world. And I try to not have knee-jerk reactions or have what do they call it before examination? Contempt prior to investigation. To not already decide, oh, I already don't want to go there. I don't like that situation. I don't like that person. Like to just be open and to be in the present, because we're trying to, when we first come in, we're trying to learn how to live a life of sobriety without constantly going to the bottle every day. And so this sort of clears a path to not self-condemnation, but to just sort of have a clean slate for a path of sobriety.
And as our friend Jackie would say, what you reminded me of was the power of the pause.
Yes.
At any moment in time when you're feeling some sort of discomfort, emotionally, whatever, stop. You don't have to react.
Yeah. And I've really, just the simple things in Alcoholics Anonymous, like their tiny little slogans, like keep it simple, pause when agitated, one day at a time. Those things are ingrained in me, and they really do help me. And keep my mouth shut before I say the thing I'm going to say, to just sit with the feeling of anger or discomfort before I react.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then Maura says, this is also helpful. I recently listened to podcast number 108, Angela's use of the 12 steps, and her take on steps 4 and 5. Yes, I have heard that too. And she was so good in that. I recommend that episode 108. She was so good talking about the 4th step and how she did the 4th step. And I highly recommend it also. Thank you for bringing that up.
I like her story. And I've met other people like her, and I just have so much respect for that, because she came in as a newcomer, and she's like, I'm not buying that.
Right.
I'm not buying this God stuff. What are you talking about? And she like had a secular program from the beginning, because she wasn't going to tolerate someone telling her, and I just really admire that. I, for whatever reason, didn't have that within me to do that. I'm like, well, whatever, I guess. Somehow we'll make it work, I guess. But so I did admire her, and I learned a lot from her too. I think the first time I ever heard about thinking about, for example, character defects of coping mechanisms, that came from her. I never really thought about it that way before. And when she was talking to me about that, it was like a little light, a little thing clicked in my head, I guess,
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, I like that too. That's a really good episode to listen to. All the
Oh,
ones
yeah,
that
it
we
was
did
so
with
good.
her on the steps were really good. And
Yes,
then
she is excellent on the steps.
she
Absolutely.
also, I think the first episode that I put with her was just her alone speaking at an AA conference. And I think that she was speaking to just a traditional AA conference, and she was sharing her story, and really cool the way that she went through that. So very, very interesting. Yeah, she's quite an asset.
Yes,
S-
she so is quite an asset, and I've never heard her tell her story, so I would love to find that
Yeah,
somewhere.
I'll maybe put some links into the show notes here.
And I also wanted to respond to Fred that, and I was just looking up Byron Katie also. It's called The Work, and she has questions, and I was trying to find her questions. But there's a teacher called Byron Katie who has a website, and she does a lot of work with getting people to find the truth of what the story is that they're telling themselves about a certain thing. And so if you're interested in more of that, look her up.
Okay, I will look that up. I have not heard of her before, so thank
Yeah,
you, Fred,
she's
and
good.
thank you, Mary,
Mhm.
for that. There's so much stuff out there to avail ourselves to that, I certainly am not. And there's so many things that I am interested in. That's one cool thing I'd have to say about my experience with being a person in recovery, is that my learning has not stopped. I am still discovering new ways of understanding all this stuff, and new ways of maybe helping other people.
Agreed.
And that makes my life have some sense of meaning and purpose, I guess.
Yeah,
And that is really valuable,
I agree. It's learning new ways, and that's why I agreed to do this podcast, because I wanted to do something new and learn new things and learn from other people and discuss topics that I don't usually discuss. And we could be free to talk to authors, and people's ideas of how to do recovery is so interesting to me, and listening to different what works for different people.
Yeah, I have learned so much and grown so much from doing this. Like, I'm speaking with you, talking with you. I'm learning so much from you. I'm learning so much from the people that are commenting in the chat room. Any guests that we have, I learn from. And over a period of time, I mean, this is recovery capital, I guess,
Yeah.
that I keep building over time, And so thank you to all these people. Thank you to Mary. Thank you to Angela. Thank you to everyone that's involved in listening to this podcast and who writes me. But thank you for your generosity in giving me this wonderful capital that I can access to help me in my recovery, because everything is staying with me. Your stories and everything that you have shared with me over the years has stayed with me, and I'm so grateful to have had this experience. And I'm very happy that you're having this experience too, Mary. You're doing a good
Yeah.
job, by the way.
Well, thank you. I don't know about that, but
I
I
knew
I
that you would be so good at this
I'm
because I just get along with you so well. I've always liked you. I always liked anything that you've ever had to write or say. And I just thought, yeah, this is just going to be perfect.
You're
this is,
very, very, very kind. And and what I was thinking when you were just in talking was that when you do the podcast, the thing that I always appreciated about you is that you listen to people, and you come from a kind, compassionate space, and then you can you're able to communicate very well. And so you're doing the way someone, I would hope, would be present for someone in a fifth step, is that you actually let the person speak, you acknowledge the person's story, and then you come from a very compassionate, gentle place. And that are all the qualities for being a fabulous person to be present for someone doing their fifth step.
thank you.
And so
And
you just do that naturally.
well, thank you. And that is so important. What you just said too, is being present for the person and listening. The most important thing the most valuable gift we can give
I
is our
agree.
time with someone, to just sit there with them and be with them and listen to them. I
Yes.
mean, that is the power, I think, of, we talk about sometimes, how AA, meetings, you don't have crosstalk. Well, there's a certain benefit to that. There's a certain benefit to just being heard, like that. So, and I agree with Joe that John is fabulous.
I agree with them too.
Thank you, guys. That's very nice. This has been really interesting, Mary. I've enjoyed this immensely. I think that the people, all of you that have been commenting and the callers have really added to this discussion.
Yeah.
It's been very intelligent and very thoughtful, and I think
And,
very respectful
and very
of the
respectful.
traditional way of doing this,
Yeah.
and maybe different ways of thinking about it.
Mhm. 'Cause
I like that
there's
nothing
always
has to be black and white.
no, and there's always gonna be people that prefer the traditional way, and they're traditionalists,
Right,
and, I'm not. And so,
right.
you find your tribe,
That's
find your
that's
find
for
your
sure.
method.
That's
Mhm.
for sure. Well, before we leave, I guess I can give you a few announcements. I'm going to be doing something on, when is it? Thursday, I guess. I don't know if it's going to be posted then, but I'm kind of excited about it. I'm going to be on a guest on a podcast. I'm going to be on
Oh,
the Daily Dose podcast, and they have I'm going to put a link out to it of their YouTube channel so you can listen to some of their episodes. But I actually listened to them in preparation for an interview I was going to do with a guest that they also interviewed, and they listened to that episode and invited me on. So I'm going to go to that. I put a link to their YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to their podcast on Apple too. So you can go there if you want to download it. I don't know when they're going to actually air that episode, but I'm looking forward to it. I'll be speaking with them on YouTube, and then they'll post it.
and what's the subject gonna be?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think I'm just going to share my story. I think that what they do is they have people in recovery on just to share their stories as a way of, reducing stigma and helping people relate. And a lot of recovery podcasts are like that. I think that's pretty much what they do.
Gotcha.
So I'll be doing that. And then on Tuesday, we have our regular meeting. And I really like to give people time before I have because we have people speak, and I like to give someone like at least a week's notice. I didn't really give anybody any notice, so I think I might just actually speak at this meeting. But the following Tuesday is going to be Dale K,
Oh,
who wrote,
great.
he wrote their book A Secular Sobriety, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. I haven't talked to him about his program anyway for quite some time, and I know that he has recently uncovered some PTSD that he's dealing with, and he's had some interesting comments lately about his take on recovery and the steps and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. He's a really thoughtful person, so that should be an interesting um, meeting. And I'll reach out to some other people that I've had as guests on past episodes to see if I can get them on coming up in the future too. Just always good to give people a little bit of time. But I've loved those meetings; they've been really great.
Yeah, they are really good.
I'll
Yeah.
put the link out there right now for that. And I guess I'll have to put all this stuff out on the show notes as well.
That's at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday nights.
8 o'clock Eastern time zone. And here's the Zoom link. If you're a Zoom bomber, please don't pay attention to this link. We don't like bombers. So if you are a Zoom bomber and you show up at that meeting, we're just going to throw you out. We're going to throw you out in a humiliating way. Okay. I'm
Really
getting silly
fast,
now.
really
I'm getting
fast
really
way.
silly now. Okay, it's time for us to say goodbye in our usual manner.
Bye, everybody.
It's 1973, and I'm getting ready to go to the disco. But before I do, I want to say goodbye. It's been nice chatting with y'all. We'll be back again next week for another episode. I think we might have a guest, actually, will we, Mary?
Yes, we will.
All right. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Bye.